Thank you, Dee, and good morning to all of you. I hope you, all my safety colleagues, enjoyed a wonderful evening last night in our nation's capital. These safety forums, I think, offer us a great opportunity for us to not only exchange our safety information and views, but to network and certainly enjoy the sights and scenes. I am simply thrilled to be here this morning on this panel. The subject is very much hits my heart in terms of one of the most important things we're doing. And as I introduce this panel, I think I'm sure you will see that these are really tremendous professionals who are advancing the subject of what we're going to talk about this morning, which is safety information and safety information sharing. Let me first introduce our panel. And to my left is Dr. Soon Man Hong. He is the Deputy Minister and the head of the Korean Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Dr. Hong has been in charge of regulating civil aviation operations since March of early this year. He has over 800 people responsible for promoting the aviation safety and security and advancing airport facilities and air navigation services. Dr. Hong received a Bachelor of Arts in Korean Literature from Yonsei University, but he also has a doctorate in civil engineering from a wonderful university, University of Washington out in Seattle. I could go on and on about the resume of Dr. Hong, but one of the most important things that I think I would like to recognize, not only Dr. Hong, but for the great country of Korea. Korea received to date the highest score from ICAO's USOP, and I think that deserves a wonderful applause from all of us. Thank you. Welcome. To my right is the Honorable Robert Sumwalt, who is member of the United States Transportation Safety Board. Robert was sworn in as the 37th member in August of 2006. He was vice chair for 2 years. And we are really pleased to know that he will be member until December 31st, 2011. Mr. Sumwalt has been a pilot for 32 years. He worked 24 years as a pilot for Piedmont and U.S. Airways. He's logged over 14,000 flight hours. So I think this fellow knows something a little bit about flying airplanes. He is a well-documented expert in safety. He's published over 85 articles and papers, and he's also been a faculty member at the University of Southern California. So welcome, Robert. To my far right is a man that I recently met several years ago, and I am thrilled to be associated with Captain Don Gunther. When Hank Krakowski, who I think you saw yesterday, left CAST a number of years ago, he led CAST along with Peggy Gilligan for a number of years. We were challenged with finding an industry co-chair. And the name Don Gunther quickly surfaced, and I heard absolutely nothing but positive things about Don Gunther. And the 2 or 3 years I've come to know him, they're all true. He's a tremendous man. He's currently a captain for Continental Airlines, and he is providing tremendous leadership right now for the United States Commercial Aviation Safety Team and for the ASIAS Executive Board. And of course, you'll learn a little bit more about ASIAS in a few minutes. So welcome, Captain Gunther. And to my far left is a man I've known for so many years. He is Mr. CAST, Mr. ASIAS, Mr. Data. It's Jay Pardee. Jay has a long legacy in the FAA, but for the last 10 years, he has devoted his career to first for forensic analysis of past accidents, and has helped us develop a safety plan here in the United States to reduce the accident rate. I think the statistics show that we've been quite remarkable in doing it. He is also now leading us into the future as we look at prognostic data for preventing future accidents. And Jay is truly a tremendous asset to us in the FAA, and I'm thrilled to have Jay on this panel. So welcome, Jay.
Thank you, John.
Now, as we talk about information, safety sharing. I have to start by using a little bit of a metaphor, and I am known for mixing metaphors, so I thought of this one, and I think I got it right. There is an elephant, a so-called elephant in the room, and I think we want to start off by acknowledging that. And I think that elephant is ASIAS, and it's Aviation Safety Information, Analysis, and Sharing. Yes, and it's something that I think is at the frontier of where we're going in the United States. And I'd like to ask Jay to share a little bit with us, especially for those who are a little bit unfamiliar with ASIAS.
John, thank you. And I haven't seen any elephants in the room, but I think ASIAS, and the acronym is Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing. I think you've already characterized some of the key points. It is a very conscious and deliberate change in the way we approach and conduct our safety business. It is a transition away from studying accidents, the forensic investigation and correction, the find and fix mentality. It very purposefully tries to get out in front of safety information, to look for precursors to future problems and accidents, prevent accidents at the precursor level. Some important principles that ASIAS is founded upon, and I want to recognize that this is a joint activity between government and industry, but the program is founded on the principles of safety and safety first and foremost and safety alone. It is a non-punitive program, and it is dedicated to combining safety information in a manner that allows us to see into emerging threats, changing risks, developing trends. It relies on information that has never been combined in a fashion like this before. Very sensitive and proprietary information from operators and manufacturers, as well as very sensitive and proprietary information from the FAA. But it is done in a manner where all of the stakeholders have an equal role in analyzing and participating in the study of that data. It is transparent to all of the contributors to the process. And it is, again, John, I think you characterized it well in the introduction. It is a very conscious change. It is, you mentioned the commercial aviation safety team. You know, frankly, CAST has been in business since December of '97. And we have promulgated some safety enhancements up to date. The majority of those have been derived from the study of accidents and incidents. We are now into another phase of CAST activity, and that phase is really looking into safety information and identifying in a prognostic fashion those precursors that can enable us to focus our resources, to do safety risk management assessments before we have the next future accident. And I think it's a very conscious and deliberate change, John. Let me leave it at that, and we can talk about some of the current activities.
Well, thank you, Jay. I think that's a great intro, and that is certainly focused on the United States. So I'd like to turn to Dr. Hong. And Dr. Hong, would you share with us your views of the challenges you see in managing safety information in Korea, but yet managing it and sharing it with other partner countries in the Asia-Pacific region?
Thank you, John. Good morning. I would like to start by expressing my personal appreciation to the federal administration for this opportunity to say about the global safety sharing first. It is an absolute honor for me to hear. First, I wanted to say about the background why the Republic of Korea has been highly interested in the global data sharing. Recently, the Republic of Korea has signed a liberalization or open skies agreement with a number of states like China, Japan, Brazil, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, and just 2 weeks ago with Canada. Of course, we already have open sky agreement with the United States in 1998. As you know already, the Republic of Korea is a very small country. We have a very small territory, which has a lot more international operation than the domestic operations. After liberalization, after open sky with many states, we are facing the situation that a lot of new foreign air carriers are flying into Korea. As a result, Korea Civil Aviation Safety Authority that I am taking charge of has a lot of burden of checking the safety status of every foreign air carriers with a limited safety information. Yes, we do comprehensive safety oversight, we do. But comprehensive oversight is only directly conducted on the national air carrier, not for the foreign air carriers. Therefore, it is not always possible. We approve the operation by foreign carriers based on the full assessment and the validation on their safety level. Furthermore, Korea has limited airspace with highly increased number of air traffic. We need more sophisticated air safety management system, for example, knowledge-based and the data-driven safety management system. That is why Korea is eager to have global aviation safety data. I want to show the example of global safety data sharing, which is applied by my organization. Korea now fully utilizes the primitive global safety data that is available to us. For example, it's EU blacklist, US ISA safety result, and ICAO use of safety concern status, etc. In case where the foreign air carriers do not have a safety concern with the EU blacklist and the EU EASA, we just do as a document review. In case when the foreign air carriers have a safety concern, either the EU blacklist or the US ISA category 2, we consult with other countries to have a safety inspection by our government before new operation to from Korea. In case when there is a safety concern, both the EU blacklist and the US ISA category 2, we disapprove the application of a new operation from Korea. However, this type of approach has also some limitation to fully check the safety level on the foreign carriers. We need more validate safety information system by sharing the safety data globally. Proactively, the United States has been developing a safety data sharing system called GAIN, and the EU also developed its e-carries to facilitate the exchange for the safety data between countries. But we do have some obstacles of global data sharing, such as differences in the legal framework and language, culture, oversight expertise. It's a data format, reporting system, and so on, country to country. There is no serious problem when data is shared at the national level, but when it comes to international level, the situation is totally different and becoming more complicated. This morning, I would like to discuss and hear about how to share and how to use global safety data in an efficient and fast manner between countries. I also would like to hear about how to remove those obstacles and encountered when we actually share the safety data globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hong. I appreciate some of the challenges you've commented on as we look to sharing data and information across borders with the cultural and legal, and in some cases, many cases, criminal challenges I think we've all been aware of recent events. Let me bring the focus back a little bit more, even at a smaller scale, and turn to Captain Gunther and ask Don, Don, what do you see has been some of the most significant challenges at an airline level? We've had FOCRA and ASAP for many years. Some believe it's progressed quite well, but others have been frustrated with its progress. What challenges have you seen in the development of that, and what can we do to move it forward?
Okay, John. I think one of the major challenges that we, and I'll speak as an individual carrier and then tie in the importance of ASIAS, to do analysis of your protected data, both FOQA and ASAP, and come up with some safety concerns. And then working with industry, we would have meetings called ASAP FOQA information sharing, where the carriers would come together and share their data, or actually the analysis of that data, and share concerns. And then as a group come up with a corrective action, but then not having the mechanism to get anything done. Not having the expertise or the connections or the subject matter experts, if you will, to bring that to a conclusion and come up with a positive corrective action. Probably one of the more frustrating things, how do we bring the players in? How do we bring air traffic in? How do we bring the FAA in? How do we bring the associations in to make these changes? And that was not readily available to the carriers. It was a little frustrating. ASIAS, and I will credit the associations, the FAA, and the carriers for sitting down, because 2 years ago, if you would have asked me if I'd be sitting here talking about ASIAS, I would have shaken my head and said, I don't think we can get there. And it was a lot of work by a lot of people that formed this alliance, if you will, to take protected data from the carriers, along with, as Jay mentioned, protected data from the FAA, along with publicly available data. And now we have a combination of information coming in that now has gone to the MITRE Corporation in this instance for analysis. And then the best part, and what really makes the ASIAS work and where our frustrations are going away as the carriers, is it now goes to CAST with the subject matter experts, which includes air traffic and includes the other entities that are necessary to make those changes. I think eventually, I think as we build, we will include some international data, and we will build this program. That is an absolute. We're just in the beginning, but I think those successes will take away the frustrations the individual carriers had on getting things accomplished to improve safety for their operation.
Oh, Don, I think that's fabulous, and I do want to acknowledge the leadership you and Peggy Gilligan have provided for the last several years. That leadership has brought us to a point in ASIAS that is, I think many of us thought was unheard of 3-4 years ago, and I want to thank both of you for the great job you both have done on that. And there's going to be a lot more we're going to talk about ASIAS, and I'm glad to hear we're looking at a sharing of international information at some further stage as we mature a little bit further. Now, Member Sumwalt, you and I chatted yesterday. The National Transportation Safety Board. You had an interesting view of what it does in its charter in terms of investigations with data, but you also had a view where you would like to see it go. Why don't you share that with us?
Well, John, first of all, the Safety Board does believe in data collection programs. We believe in data collection programs, and we've come out in the last 2 years for airlines to strongly encourage airlines to have ASAP programs and FOCA programs and LOSA programs and SMS. So the Safety Board does believe in those programs. And I'm glad that we do, because as I put on this pen every morning, it says the National Transportation Safety Board. It does not say the National Accident Investigation Board. I feel that we do a very good job at the Safety Board of doing forensic accident investigation, but we do need to be proactive. We need to be looking for ways to prevent the accident. And in essence, we did take an accident that occurred a few years ago, and that was an accident, but we issued recommendations for proactive means that I just mentioned, the ASAP, the LOSA, the FOCA program.
And I must say, I got to give kudos to the NTSB. I remember 10 years ago, I think the relationship between the NTSB and the FAA was certainly not very well. And I think there was a clash over responsibilities of what needs to be done in the future in terms of information versus what was the accident. And I think today, through your leadership and many of the staff people at the NTSB, I think we've got a good balance going on, and we certainly do appreciate the input from the National Transportation Safety Board. I'd like to look at something. It's a bit of a connection to yesterday's panel. Hank Krakowski led a fabulous panel on next generation air traffic systems, et cetera. And when we begin, and all countries are involved in this, we're transforming our air transportation systems. The United States, of course, has taken a very long, rich legacy system and moving it forward. Other countries like China, maybe Korea, are starting more from a clean sheet approach and moving ahead. But in any of those scenarios, as we change the existing system, the principal intent is to improve efficiency. But how do we know we're not introducing safety issues? How do we know that, that we are creating in an underlying way, and we won't know it until it happens 5 years from now, that we're creating a potential safety flaw? I'll ask any one of my panelists to have who has a strong comment on that.
Well, John, I think one of the things that we're able to do now is, with this collected data from the carriers coming in, along with the other data that I mentioned, the other sources of data, we can actually develop models, and from those models determine, are there in fact safety issues as we introduce this change? Because just the word change in itself is a threat. And so as we introduce change, we need to look at what are the threats that we're introducing and how do we manage those. And the data with the proper tools will actually give you a model that you can run these types of programs through and, if you will, filter out the risk that might be introduced.
John,
Yes, sir.
Can I add a comment to Captain Gunther? and I think Don's right on the mark as usual. But looking, I think 2 comments and get my thoughts in order. But certainly all the lessons learned from the past. And I mentioned CAST had issued 70 solutions, but it had identified a number of safety issues that were as part of the causal analysis for those solutions. So one of the benefits that we currently have through ASIAS today, and we're just beginning down this road, as Peggy and Don remind me, we have a long way to go, and we've just begun the journey. But we're already demonstrating the capability to measure the frequency of the problems that we believe we have put safety measures in place in the past to solve. We will be able to detect changes in the frequency of those problems in the long term should we introduce a change with unintended consequences. I think the ability, as Don mentioned, FOQA and ASAP, as we begin to acquire a library of, say, FOQA flights done from city to city, just the family of curves and the ability to detect aberrations, exceedances, atypicalities. We've begun to develop the digital software, John, with the help of companies such as Austin Digital and MITRE and SAGEM to detect changes. I think Dee in her opening comments had mentioned NextGen. Wanted to also mention that not only have we gone down the path of sharing safety information commercially with the FAA, NASA, and the operators, but in the JPDO version of SASAR, all the 6 government agencies have now agreed at that agency level to share equivalent safety information. So I think we're well launched. And I would echo Don's sentiments. Our ability to combine FOQA data or to detect a change, to your earlier point, in ASAP data, a flight crew report, to be able to query digital FOQA data to say, can you find a digital signature to validate the concern expressed in the narrative report? And then to understand that digital threat and to train the radar track data, which FAA possesses all across the country, to search for that same digital signature. I think we're on the verge of doing some wonderful things.
Right.
And I think our ability to detect future trends is all in front of us, but we are focused on that strongly.
Right. Member Sumwalt, I think you've got some views on this.
Well, I do. I turn to the words of someone who I have a lot of respect for, and that's Dr. James Reason, who says that for every decision there's a potential downside that has to be managed. And I constantly worry about the potential downside, the unintended consequences. If we issue this recommendation to industry or to the FAA, if that recommendation is implemented, what is the potential downside? And I do worry about that, and I think we all need to. So you raise a very perceptive question, what is the potential downside? We do believe, the Safety Board, as I said, does believe in data collection and analysis programs. But I also personally believe that we have to share the data, and that's what this panel is about today, is talking about data sharing. A quote that we all know is that the quote that says that those who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And since we happen to be in the accident investigation business, I am reminded of an accident that had, I want to make sure we remember that accident so we don't repeat it. Just 2 days ago was the 34th anniversary of TWA Flight 514, a Boeing 727 that crashed about 30 miles from here while going into Washington Dulles on December the 1st of 1974. There was ambiguity in the cockpit over the clearance. We're cleared for the approach. What does that mean? Does that mean we can descend to 1,800 feet? What does that mean? The crew did decide that they could, the captain did decide that they could descend to 1,800 feet. They did. The premature descent led to a CFIT accident. 92 fatalities. Now, the sad thing is that 6 weeks earlier, another airline going into the same airport on the same approach made the same mistake. But in this case, the crew trapped the error before it became catastrophic. Right. They figured it out, they climbed to a safe altitude, and the accident never occurred. That airline was United Airlines. Just about 8 months earlier, they had formed a confidential in-house instant reporting system. And these pilots dutifully reported it to their own instant reporting system. So the pilots at United Airlines were alerted of this potential problem. They knew at United that this was a potential problem. But the sad thing is there was not a means for sharing this information with other carriers. And so because of that, to the FAA's credit, they started the Aviation Safety Reporting System. And that program has served us well over these years. But now, for the last 12 or 15 years, we've had companies starting their ASAP programs. So I'm afraid that we might be getting back into a stovepipe mentality where this airline has the information, but this one doesn't, or this one doesn't. So this reinforces the need that if we don't want to repeat this, we've got to learn from it. And so these data sharing programs are essential to making sure that we don't repeat a bad past.
That's right. That's actually a very good point. And before I turn to Dr. Hong and pose a question to him, I'd like to take an opportunity to make a plug for something that is very much connected to what you just said, Member Sumwalt. We have developed in the FAA what we're calling an accidents lessons learned library. And I think that very much addresses that very point. Member Sumwalt said it perfectly fine. If you don't know the history, if you don't follow history, you're condemned to repeat it. And history in aviation is replete with case after case after case of accidents that have very similar characteristics of ones that existed years past. And so this library that we have, and it's online, it shares information in a very user-friendly, very easy to read information about each accident, what were the causes, and it's intended to be there and have a legacy such that when many of us leave tomorrow or retire next week or next month, and the next crew that comes in can see this, and that information and knowledge is not lost. Thank you very much for those comments. Dr. Hong, when we look at accidents in the past and what we've done in terms of what some people call forensic analysis, an accident occurs. Member Sumwalt and his team goes in and they truly analyze it to the fine detail of the accident, come up with the causes. Certainly in the United States and in many countries like Korea, you implement safety plans to prevent that from happening. In a relative sense, that's easy. How do we get ahead of that and do prognostic? How do we look at information that is not an accident? How do we look at that and come to a conclusion that this is going to lead to an accident or has a high risk of leading to an accident, and then make the decision to make an intervention? Do you have any thoughts on how we cross that bridge from forensic to prognostic?
Actually, I think that if we if we don't have any safety information sharing tools, if you have some fancy SMS or some fancy software, that is useless. Yeah. So that, and then I wanted to have some leadership to sharing the information between the countries internationally, globally. And we are not strongly mandating enough facilitating sharing of the valued information system right now. So we don't have any global agree upon mechanisms or standardization procedures yet. So we need the leadership, a kind of to facilitate safety data is sharing. I think the most obstacles can be resolved bilaterally, because I said to you about what kind of legal framework. So we have obstacles, differences of the legal framework and the cultural and data format or something like that. And I already said to you, but only everything is most obstacles could be resolved bilaterally. We make some format, as standardization or something like that. But except legal issues, as it is because each state has a different legal systems where the political influence is involved, which cannot be easily changed based upon the bilateral negotiation. So I think that such legal issues could be solved by the ICAO by mandating states to follow the legal framework, the global data sharing, which is established by the ICAO. And the liquid explosive terror measures in 2006 can be taken as the most well-known example of international cooperation, information sharing in aviation security. Most information, fast information sharing made prompt and global response through the ICAO possible, and was very useful in establishing measures for individual countries. We already know that. Once each country has a uniform legal basis, it can start a dialogue with other states regarding with the safety data sharing at the bilateral and the regional level or sub-regional or international level. It is my suggestion for the new leadership of this legal base.
Great. That was very, very good comments. Jay, I'm going to, did you want to add on to Dr. Hahn?
If I could, John, if we had just a moment. I wanted to go back to an earlier point in your question and how might we detect, safety threats before there's an actual accident. And actually, Member Sumwald's comments about James Reason's model remind me. One of the things we are currently identifying and working on in ASIAS, and we focus, John, on some of the safety barriers that are in the system, the barriers to protect against more severe safety threats. A particular example that we have been working on in ASIAS, and it began with flight crew members reporting an unusual number of enhanced ground prox warnings in the cockpit on approach to certain mountainous terrain airports. I think very quickly we were able to look at, knowing that that is not a normal expected operation of the system. There is a safety barrier in place, as Dr. Reason would call it, the enhanced ground prox warning system. But we now have the ability to follow up and find out what are the causes for those enhanced ground prox warnings. And then I want to loop back to Captain Gunther, quickly combining, not so quickly, but FOCO and ASAP data and FAA radar track data. I think we got an understanding that, in fact, there were some causes for the high frequency of enhanced ground prox warnings and the subsequent pull-up alerts by combining that information in a fashion that neither the FAA had ever had the capability to do before, nor the airlines. And we saw that there were shortcomings in, John, perhaps the way the FAA calculates MVA protection areas.
Mm-hmm.
We learned that there were equipage upgrades that would make the aircraft more tolerant to nuisance alerts, software upgrades for the TAWS box, upgrades to the terrain database, and we saw an opportunity again for FAA to look at its airspace procedures, how we manage traffic flow over mountainous terrain. Again, as Don and I were talking this morning, now that falls within the province of CAS to execute those solutions. We've combined the engine of ASIAS. We're able to detect an emerging threat. There has been no accident. We have an opportunity to craft solutions and deploy those voluntarily through CAST. And I think for extra points, if we could, looking at some of the modern technology and the efficiency that is possible through perhaps refined airspace procedures using RNAV visual or RNP, we can both apply precision approach to avoid throwing aircraft at Mount Diablo at better than 700 feet per minute closure. But I think, and I defer to Captain Gunther, I think there's an opportunity for efficiency in aircraft operation and perhaps fuel savings.
John, if I could
Yes,
just
sir.
tag on with Jay, one small example of what Jay's talking about efficiencies. Continental, along with a couple other airlines, designed a FMS arrival, RMP arrival for visual use into an airport. The reason was we had detected some threats to our crews due to some of the airport design and associated airports in the vicinity and the way they had to fly the arrival. And it took a long time, but we implemented that arrival. And it was the most interesting thing. Initially, there was a lot of pushback, but it ended up being a very cooperative effort with air traffic and this particular TRACON and the airlines. And the one comment that I'll make, not only did our alerts, if you will, go away in the FOQA system, and we saw much more efficient, stable approaches, but the air traffic manager had commented to me, he says, you know, the most interesting thing, when the airlines get to the initial point, which is several thousand feet high and a few miles away from the airport, they say, you're cleared the FMS visual. And he said, the next thing we would say to the aircraft is, contact tower, because we knew the entire arrival was predictable and repeatable, and they flew an exact arrival. And he says, we actually found the communications were reduced, and the efficiencies of getting aircraft into this airport increased. And that's on a very small scale. And to Jay's point, what we have the capability of doing with ASIAS as we move along.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. There's a little story, and I'm going to ask one of our panelists to share with you. In my view, it is the true power of ASIAS. And unfortunately, it didn't act to prevent an accident, but nevertheless, it highlights for us what it can really do. And it brings us back to the Calm Air accident in Lexington in the summer of, I believe it was '07. And very unfortunate accident. Pilot, in short, took off on the wrong runway, did not have adequate runway length, crashed. I believe it was 49 deaths on that accident. But it's what happened after that was incredibly enlightening to us. And Jay, would you like to share what we found instead of the accident being on the surface being a one-off? How do you prevent something like that from happening? It in fact wasn't that, it was something else. What happened, Jay?
Yeah, John, and happy to do that. And I think very similar to the example that Member Sumwalt had given earlier. I think the Lexington, Kentucky accident was a shock and a surprise to us. It was not a safety threat that we had recognized or anticipated. And to the best of our knowledge, pardon me, it simply had not existed before. I want to recognize Nick Sabatini here as well. One of the requests that happened or I received shortly after the Lexington accident, John, was from Nick. To go back and look at the safety information that was available prior to the accident and to see if it could be determined. Were there any fingerprints or any indications of the potential for such an accident? And the activity actually was a precursor to our ASIAS activity as well. It was an opportunity for us to hone our text mining tools, to learn about developing certain software concepts, to uncover, I think, lapses of safety in our system. But the short summary is, I think over 20 years, and personally I'd expected John to see one or two prior instances. It almost always seems like in my prior career in the engine world, we would ask, have you ever seen an event like this before? And normally it's, well, there was that one isolated event in '82 and the other isolated event in '79. But looking over 20 years, we found out once we studied the Lexington accident, which you're correct, it was a wrong runway departure for which the aircraft did not have the performance to execute a safe takeoff, and we lost 49 lives. There had been 116 prior events, never more than one experienced by any single carrier. And frankly, we in the FAA did not, nor the operators, see the ability to connect those dots, John, and to see the developing trend. I think ultimately what we learned was there were some 22 contributing factors that we saw recurring repetitively in all of the prior 116 events over the preceding 20 years, as well as 9 geometric features at airports that tended to contribute to lack of situational awareness of the flight crews. But the long and short of it was we've always complained about, frankly, not having enough data. You can take a reverse position. We in fact are drowning in data. We don't use it effectively. But we learned that looking through, remember Sumwalt mentioned ASRS, I think very quickly about 4.5 million records in 10 days, 116 prior events, 2 of which actually resulted in damage to aircraft. We did learn that things that contributed to lack of situational awareness, current signage, markings, crew procedures, AT procedures. But this information, and maybe to Dr. Hahn's point earlier, had it been analyzed and had it been disseminated, we may have had the ability to share that information worldwide and perhaps have prevented ComAir. But I think Nick's point was proven. The information was there. We just needed to string the beads on the necklace and understand what the threats were.
It was very sobering, and I think that it highlights again the challenge we have. How do we look at a mountain of data and see the real nuggets that's going to tell us of the future? Remember, Sumwalt, in the NTSB, you are constantly looking at data from accidents and quite frankly also from incidents. And I think through your background, you've got a tremendous history. As I read your resume of working with ASRS and this very subject of information and mining of data, what can we do to further our expertise in that area?
John, we are here to talk about information sharing, but I think in order to share information, you've got to collect information. And we've got 2 of the largest airlines in the world, based right here in the United States, that, as we sit here today, do not have active ASAP programs. And as Bill Voss said yesterday, there are reasons for that. Whatever those reasons are, need to be put beside us, and we need these programs. These programs are very important. Like I say, we're here to talk about data sharing. We can't share data if we don't collect it. So let's move past that. I've been on the union side of the house. I've been on the company side of the house. We need to get beyond that. We saw an accident a couple of years ago where this company, we found that the pilots on this flight were not following standard operating procedures. our investigators asked the chief pilot for that company, and mind you, this was a company that had about 900 pilots and about 110 jets in their fleet. Our investigators asked the chief pilot, how do you know if pilots on these repositioning flights are following SOPs? The chief pilot replied, same way I do any flight, following SOPs. We look at the numbers. You know, did a particular flight leave on time? Did it land on time? Did we have someone on the jump seat? That's the only way I know whether any of my flights are operating according to SOP. And I think that that's a pretty embarrassing response. We don't want on-time performance to be the only way that we know what's going on out there. We have to have these data collection and analysis programs.
Great. I agree with you. Dr. Hong, let's move back to the challenges we face internationally. Korea, I think, is truly one of the great leaders in the aviation community in the Far East. What are you seeing as either enabling factors or obstacles to you sharing incident information in an open and honest way with your country partners like China, Thailand, and other countries out in the region? Is there something that we can learn from Korea in terms of how to better facilitate the exchange of data?
Actually, in Korea has developed some integrated web-based overall resource management systems we have, so that we integrate all of information from the airport and airliner or instant accident and data is collected just one software, and we integrate them. But we now try to analyze of something as meaningful as prognostic as ideas from this. But we do not exchange any idea of the data sharing with China, with Japan, with so on, because there is a kind of some diplomatic issues, because we discuss about what says is why don't we inspect your air carriers, and then you do not believe me, or they against our positions. So that it is very cautious to talk about the negotiation with the aviation safety data is bilaterally between Korea and Japan and China. China already has their strong aviation. They believe that they have a strong aviation safety oversight system. Japan has one of those, but Korean has one of those. But everybody has some proud of their own system. But we have everywhere we have some potential to have some accident. A long time ago, we have there are big accidents we have. We already know that Korean Air has 3 consecutive accidents we have. At the time, I searched FOCA data. Yesterday, I amazing about your activities. You already evaluated FOCA data, and then you utilize the FOCA data to prevent some accident or incident as activities. But I checked at the time that it was very serious in our cases. So we looked it up. It's FOCA data. There are so many negligence of the instant accident, potential risk of instant accident is cautious. So that we neglect them, and then we have an accident. So that now we have to share some sharing information. First is United States, and secondly is Japan and China, because we shared with the United States as Japan and China. I believe that is or United States has shared with the information with safety information with Korea, and they release they have some relaxation to share about their safety data to Korea. Is that an idea?
Great, great. Dr. Gunther, excuse me, Captain Gunther. I elevated you already.
Some captains think
they're doctors. Captain Gunther, as the industry co-chair of CAST in the ASIAS Executive Board, you and Peggy have a vision of how we're going to move from our more immediate issues to, as you said earlier, going more international and bringing it in and really going global. Probably the most immediate, because we work very closely with EASA, is maybe the E-CARES, if I'm saying that properly, their database. I bumped into Passos this morning, Brazil, and the data, I'm sure they have quite a bit of it down there on the Embraer aircraft. When will we see that? And what is your thinking in terms of how we can bring that in, although accounting for some of the challenges that Dr. Hong mentioned in terms of the cultural and the perhaps legal obstacles that are in force?
Well, I think I'll address that a couple ways, John. To give you a timeline would not be right at this time because ASIAS is really just now getting legs underneath it and starting to move. Our first a couple of studies have gone through the analysis phase and are now in the hands of CAST to come up with safety enhancements. And what I envision is as that process picks up speed, that we will definitely reach out to the international community. But to Dr. Hong's point, we have some challenges. The challenges are both domestic and international. How do we promote and ensure that ASAP programs and FOCA programs are not only accepted but are maintained? And it does hurt when you have major carriers whose programs are shut down, because that is such a valuable source of data, and they are part of our system. Once you get over that hurdle, the next hurdle is, how do we bring in all these carriers? Just within the U.S. alone, we've done a very good job of getting the mainline carriers in, and we are now working on the regional community, which is a huge task, a large number of carriers, to bring them into ASIAS. And then we are in discussions on how do we bring in foreign carriers and their information and make them part of the process. And then the last part of the biggest hurdle, and again, Dr. Hong stressed this, is the legal issues. The legal issues are very broad, domestically as well as international. How do we manage that? In the Comair accident, the ASAP data was presented to the court. The comment I have there is the airman is protected, certainly, but then the carrier is at risk. And so individual carriers may say, well, what's the risk versus the benefit? Right. And of course, in a safety position, that's our job, is to say, well, the benefit's worth that risk, but we need legislation to prevent that from happening. And then internationally, I think he stated very well, an international effort to protect this data. Yeah.
Member Sumwalt, a bit of a transition in a different way of looking at information. Cockpit videos always is a lightning rod for opinions of the value of it, and yet privacy of information, I think most notably from the pilot unions. What's your view of the value of this and the likelihood of us getting this kind of information that I think can open a whole new door to looking at precursor information?
Well, I was a party member on what ended up being I was a representative from the union as a party to what ended up as the NTSB's longest investigation in history, the flight of US Air 427. And here was a case where we didn't know exactly what happened. The board didn't really know. We know that the airplane corkscrewed out of the sky and crashed and killed 132 people. It would have been great from an investigator's point of view to have had video in that cockpit to have been able to say for sure what did happen. The process did work. The safety board did determine the probable cause of that, but it took 4 years to do that. As a former pilot, somebody that spent 24 years in an airline cockpit, I am very concerned about data privacy. I want to make sure that's secure. And the safety board does have on our most wanted list the recommendation for cockpit video recorders. I think from an investigation point of view, I think there's merit to that. And every time this comes up at our most wanted list board meeting, I ask the question to our general counsel, tell me about the data protections on that. And I am assured that the legislation that covers the cockpit voice recorder is the same protections that would protect cockpit video recorder. In other words, it cannot be released by the safety board for any purpose. The safety board cannot release that.
I think the challenge is internationally, I don't think other countries don't necessarily share that same principle, and I think that's one of the challenges we have in the FAA as we've talked about it. Nick Sabatini, the Associate Administrator for Aviation Safety, we've had some of these conversations about how to move forward on something like this, and it's, an American carrier, Captain Gunther, your airplane going down to some other country, having a crash, there's no guarantee of protection.
Yeah, and as Robert stated, that's the concern,
right.
Is proper legislation to protect that. And then there's some other hurdles to get over, obviously.
And I think that's a big challenge. At this point, I'm looking to Dee, perhaps, or do we have any email questions that have come through? And maybe it's an opportunity for the audience to engage with the panel. I'm looking and I don't see, so let me turn to questions and answers from anyone from the floor who, I see a hand up here to my left. Oh, we got another one over here. Another half hour. I thought there's a fellow over here. And, oh, there's one right behind Peggy.
I did send this by, is this working? All right, good. I sent it by email as well, but maybe it was too late to submit. If we accept that ASAP programs are an exceptional source of safety information and part of a critical safety program, what would be the downside of mandating such programs and getting it maybe out of the negotiation realm within an airline?
One of the problems, and I'm going to separate ASAP from FOQA. ASAP is really an agreement between three parties. And I think that agreement is critical to the functioning of the program. Also, the ASAP program has what we call the Event Review Committee, and each of those parties sit on that. And to say we don't want that agreement between those three parties, that agreement is what gives the reporter, whatever discipline we're talking about, whether it's pilots, technicians, dispatchers, flight attendants, ground workers, give them the confidence that this is truly a protected program. And I would have concerns about not having that agreement in place. Is that a hard agreement to knock out? Oh yeah, you sit at the table and you work out the issues. But it's been done time and again. In spite of some of the currents going on in the industry right now, within the ATA, we have 2 or 3 carriers who just recently renewed their programs. So it really is, if all the parties sit down and we're all dedicated towards safety enhancement and those protections are there, I would be probably personally opposed to looking at a mandated ASAP. Now, FOQA, we have the protections in place. And mandating a FOQA program, the digital data, makes sense to me because that is data that is easily comes off every aircraft that can be protected. It's de-identified. I see an event in Fuqua, and as a safety manager, do I get excited about it? Absolutely. But do I know who flew that flight? No, and I don't want to know. I just want to know what are the issues. So I hope that helps a little bit with my position on that.
Let me, before going to the next one, let me also add, and unfortunately I don't see Hank Krakowski in the room, but I was aware at some point that the air traffic community
Absolutely.
was looking towards their own.
It's ASAP.
Yeah, well, they had a different acronym for it, but it's effectively an ASAP program with the controllers. And unfortunately, I guess I can't get the status, but I know that it's something in the works, and I think that's going to be another avenue for getting additional information from the controller's perspective of what they're seeing.
John, I think that
Do you know, Jay?
that program is actually approved and underway at a couple of pilot locations, and our plans are to bring the controller ASAP into ASIAS, and that is the understanding we have with Hank, that in addition to ASAP for flight crews, there'll be ASAP for air traffic controllers, which, you know, John, would give us another exciting side of
Oh, absolutely.
the incident or safety issue we're trying to understand and discuss. And in addition to Don's comment about bringing the regional carriers on board, and we're like, looking at Wally and Hassan, we're about that close to 9 regional carriers. The maintenance MRO ASAP data, we are about that close to adding to ASIAS. So you would have the controller ASAP portion of it, the flight crew ASAP portion, the FOQA data, FAA radar track, and ultimately the maintenance ASAP data. And the intent is to de-identify, protect, and aggregate and use all of that effectively.
Great. Before going to someone in the audience, let me maybe do some alternating. I have some emails here. Let me share one email and see if our panelists can give some insight into. The question is, what kind of international guidance material is available for states to establish the legal framework, the best practices and recommendations for a just culture, data collection and data sharing? What is lacking and needs to be done? And I think that's an interesting question. We talked about the differences, but what can we do to come up with perhaps universal best practices or standards?
You know,
Anyone?
One reaction I think I might have, John, is we, the FAA, are right on the cusp of implementing SMS. And I'm thinking the SMS approach, which has a supporting safety culture piece. You know, as you know, we're just about to propose an ANPRM, seeking input and guidance from the industry. But as part of that safety management system, or SMS, you know, which includes safety policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety culture, we would design and propose that certain attributes should be met. There should be a supporting safety culture. It should be non-punitive. We're going to work with industry and harmonize our thoughts internationally, probably over the next 9 to 10 months. And I think some guidance will fall out of the SMS activity, would be my initial reaction. I think that's a place to certainly use safety information to support safety risk management and safety assurance.
Dr. Hahn, let me ask you, should ICAO play a role in that? Can they play a role?
I think that the ICAO have that kind of take that kind of roles, but I think that some of countries' leadership is necessary, because that ICAO is not some implementation. They do not implement something as the United States implement something and European countries implemented something, and they have also lots of experiences that they have, and Korean has experience too. So that some of the leading countries as getting together and get an idea to send as ICAO to make this was frame of this international. This is an international framework to solve the legal problem. Actually, you guys is especially FAA working for the FAA is that there are so many engineers, but my background was some of the legal. I have some study about the legal side. So the legal problem is a very serious one. Is because that there is something is happened. Some air carriers, they say that this is my own data. Why do you spread this data to others? So governments don't have that kind of as privileges to send my data to other countries, like the United States, like Japan, or something like that. As in this case, as the government have some serious situation in this case, so that we have to prevent that kind of situation before that kind of things has happened, so that we just say that engineering concept is they can do everything, but especially it's a diplomatic issues, as some legal issues inside of each country. It's very complicated. We have to prepare something internationally to prepare to sharing the information as country to between the countries and between the region, between the internationals. We have to prepare something. I think that I wanted to stress the legal issues today, because this legal issue is the most important thing. Is for the sharing the information globally.
John, could I add a
Yes,
comment globally? But Dr. Han reminds me, from an ICAO perspective, one of the, I think, very useful purposes in the area that we are working with ICAO is a CAST ICAO common taxonomy. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily see the need to have all data, safety data in the world sent to ICAO, but to develop guidance that would suggest all of the countries and safety systems of the world would have a common taxonomy, so that we can share or could share information. You mentioned ECARES earlier, ECCARES. We are working informally with ECARES to have a common taxonomy between ASIAS and ECARES. We've already taken that step. But I think that's a function that would have value at the ICAO level, would be to provide guidance so that the data we do collect would be collected in a fashion that would enable us to share the results, or to look at the larger aggregated database.
It seems to me, though, it's as long as certain countries have their codes, their laws, that's going to allow courts to investigate criminal activity following an accident. What did the designer do? What were they thinking, et cetera? As long as that exists, I think that's going to be a serious obstacle for us to broaden for global sharing.
I think while we're talking about just culture and how do we get this internationally implemented, I do think that ICAO potentially has a role in this. But I think we all need to understand what just culture is and what it isn't. I think that there's a lot of talk out there today about just culture, but who really understands it? And it is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It is not a no-blame culture. It is one where there is accountability, and we have to understand that. And I think that we need to calibrate everybody to where we at least understand those things about just culture.
Good, very good point. Yes, Dennis.
Thank you, Jeff. Yesterday, Nick chaired a panel of the general aviation community, and a lot of discussion. The GA crosses a large scope, everything from the light sport aircraft all the way up through BBJs and A380s now as Part 91 operators. There's a lot of information being collected. General aviation contributes a large number of accidents to our database, and the fatal accident number, unfortunately, is what we consider unacceptable. Yet, at the same time, the general aviation pilot is hesitant at times to report this type of information. We have the NASA ASRS program that they can go through, but concerns over punitive actions if they were to report, even to the point of declaring an emergency with ATC if they're in a dire situation because of concerns of punitive actions. This panel is talking a lot about the commercial side of the data collection and how we share that data. Maybe could you touch a little bit on what's being done from the GA perspective, because that gets back to the public's perception of the safety of the system, and if people don't continue to learn to fly, then how do we continue to populate our pilot pipeline and get people in the air to fill the cockpits for the commercial carriers, which you're really talking about today?
Fabulous question, Dennis. Who would like to take that one?
Let me start, perhaps, John. But Dennis, I think when the ASIAS vision was created by Nick and Peggy and the industry, it was never strictly a commercial focus. The group that meets this afternoon, the ASIAS Executive Board, right now the only community that is contributing data to that forum is the Commercial Aviation Safety Team. Probably in terms of readiness and discipline or availability, I think the International Helicopter Safety Team and the General Aviation Safety Committee are probably the next entities, the next communities we hope will reach a point and see the value and the benefit of contributing safety information to ASIAS and to working within a protected ASIAS environment. So I think it is a great question. Some of the activities currently going on commercially at CAST, we're just embarking, Dennis, on a study of TCAS RAs. Frankly, it has international aspects as well as domestic, but it certainly has general aviation and business aircraft elements. Runway incursions, as we studied in CAST a couple of years ago. Frankly, we did that jointly, as you know, with the General Aviation Steering Committee. It was a joint activity. Very frequently, it's a 121 and 91 issue. I see the need to continue to push for International Helicopter Safety Team data and General Aviation Steering Committee data to become part of ASIAS and to enjoy some of the tools and analytical capabilities that we are building in ASIAS today. I think there's a wealth of data. It's a different kind of data, Dennis. It may not be a mile deep, but it's 10 miles wide.
Let me see if I can build on what Dennis asked. Is there a role for the insurance companies to provide the necessary impetus to get that data, which could help set rates? I know this is a bit of a banking question and an insurance question, but have we explored that in any way? Has anyone had any thoughts on how to pursue that?
Yeah, you're asking, to the question of general aviation, though, and just to add on to what Jay was saying, that's a very important group that needs to come into ASIAS, and time will. We're looking at just the amount of data that's coming out of the commercial industry is unbelievable. And I guess, in a way, yes, we do need to encourage reporting. We do need to encourage that data, and we do need to set up protections so people feel free to report. Because I will tell you, my experience is the richest data source I've ever seen has been the Aviation Safety Action Program, because they're telling us what happened and why. And they're telling us things that we would never know about. 98% of our reports we would not know about without that program. And I suspect that would be true of the other disciplines and other aviation communities. And so, yeah, we need to see, but as far as insurers, how they fall in, I think I would put that question to a general aviation panel and say, how do we encourage this information? How do you become part of ASIAS? And that would be a logical step for us as we move forward.
Great. We have a question, I believe, in the back.
Thank you very much. Rory Kay, Airline Pilots Association. This is a fascinating panel and some very, very interesting points being kicked around here for sure. I have to circle back around on the cockpit video imaging. The Airline Pilots Association, as I said yesterday, we represent about 60,000 pilots, and I've just now pretty much got a green light to say I'm now speaking for 100,000 airline pilots in this country, voices total opposition to the installation of cockpit video imaging in our cockpits. A picture is worth 1,000 words. We have a high level of concern that just looking at a video of a pilot in his last moments battling an incident, or even worse, a tragedy leading to the loss of his life and everybody else on board, will sway the deeper technical investigation that has continued there. We also have a very high level of concern about data internationally, which is what this panel is all about. The NTSB, the FAA, we can have all the rules and regulations in place for the protection of data on a domestic accident. Once that airplane has an incident or an accident outside of this country, all bets are off. I am appalled at the notion that the cockpit imagery of pilots dying would be on the news that evening.
Actually, that is the central point I think we've been wrestling with, and I think in our limited knowledge at this point in time, it does seem to be insurmountable. Because I don't think I've heard anyone come up with a solution that can that can overcome that. But I'm hopeful that we can do that. I think cockpit video, it does provide a wealth of information, and it's maybe even more valuable in the general aviation area because there is almost a total lack of any other data. They don't necessarily have flight data recorders or cockpit voice recorders. So, you know, if we were to move in that direction, that may be the first step. But certainly, sir, your comments on the commercial pilot side, and especially even if we could find a solution in the United States, an airplane going to another country could very seriously have some very unwanted results. Another question.
Good morning. My name is Jerome Frechette. I'm with Southwest Airlines Pilot Association. I have a question in a slightly different area of data collection, and that would be, and I'd like to direct this maybe toward Mr. Jay Pardee. He was part of this. Back in the 80s, the 90s, when I was an aircraft accident investigator, we did a lot of work with high-energy rotating parts. And the question is part and component failures, individual part and component failures, part of the data collection effort for ASIAS, especially with regard to times and cycles, because back then we had a very powerful tool called CAM that was developed by the Engine and Propeller Directorate in conjunction with Pratt & Whitney. And we were able to predict failures and consequently publish inspection routines to route out any second or third failures. Anyway, is the engine and component failures part of the ASIAS, and is CAM part of your toolbox?
Jay?
Jerome, let me comment, and that was a different part of my life, but when I was the manager of the Engine and Propeller Directorate, and yes to your first question, CAM, Continued Airworthiness Assessment Methodologies, is still the risk management methodology employed by the Engine and Propeller Directorate. It has stood the test of time. The chief scientist, Anna Azevedo, still uses it, teaches it. We apply it to all of the engines in New England, as well as all of the other directorates from a policy and a guidance perspective. There is nothing, Jerome, that would prevent manufacturers from bringing data such as you described to ASIAS. Currently, the Continued Operational Safety, the COS programs at the EP&D, Engine Propeller Directorate, and as you well know, we look at all causes for premature engine removal, in-flight shutdowns, and frankly, I still look at them, Jerome, on a monthly basis because I just can't stop. And I feel like I'm personally attached to that for the rest of my life, but all of the engine models I look at and track today, all of them are still, I look at the ETOPS shutdown numbers once a month. Every single engine in that ETOPS reliability summary is at or better than 180 minutes over water. You recall 0.05 for 120, 0.02 for 180. They're all 02 or better. We still use Fran Favera, the current manager, still directs his staff to conduct risk assessment methodologies with all the engine primary companies using CAM. The aircraft world approach is cosmic, but they have common goals, you know, to identify a hazard, to come up with a mitigation strategy, both short and long term, and then to fly the fleet safely to a replacement. Currently, we don't have manufacturers' data being contributed to ASIAS, but we do envision the capability, and the door is open. John, do you want to add?
Captain Guthrie, I'd like to ask. I thought in the ASIAS, I thought we were beginning to bring in and having conversations with Boeing, Airbus,
Boeing and Airbus are both on the ASIAS executive board and very involved in ASIAS. And I think part of the reason, obviously, the manufacturers have data that will also help with the analysis, you know, of incidents and that. I would imagine the expansion of that would naturally lead to looking at components and parts like that.
And for the person who asked the question, in lieu of ASIAS, or as a practice that has gone on for many, many years, the companies, especially if I speak for the U.S., the companies in the local FAA certification office have very rigorous programs of evaluating, investigating, perhaps not so much reliability information, but certainly in-service events from the, I think Boeing would say, you know, 12,000 in a given year. And that whittles down to a, you know, somehow some level of threshold that begins the negotiation and conversation between the FAA and the manufacturer. So it does exist at a stovepipe level, but I think we see the value and benefit if we can bring it all into a collective environment like ASIAS.
If I could just add one more comment, Jerome, you may or may not be aware of, I would say, the equivalent ASIAS program for engines, Roman. And frankly, that is a Part 193 protected source of voluntary information about engine or component. High energy rotating failures are certainly a part of it. The Jet QC activity that was spun off following Sioux City is now a complete sharing industry-wide of all melt-related defects. And there is a Roman reporting system for both manufacturing and design errors. It's de-identified, it's triple blind. It would be an ideal candidate to potentially bring into ASIAS. Yep. But I left that there in New England when I departed, John.
Crystal, I believe.
My name is Crystal from Korea Civil Aviation Safety Authority. I'd like to invite any of the panelists on my question. I think we all agreed upon the importance and criticality of the sharing and collecting the safety information. But if all the data shared and collected is not lively used based on the proper analysis, I think it cannot be an information. It's just data stuck in the computer. So I think there should be strong attention also given to how to analyze and how to use the information. So in this sense, I think there should be some strong, proper guidance for the states to use all the vast amount of the data available nowadays. And also, there should be some categories for certain data can be used for the specific purposes. That's my question.
Crystal, that's the $64,000 question, because that truly is the challenge we have from forensic to prognostic. We have more data than we'll ever need to have. The question really is, how can we look? I think your question is, how can we analyze that data and come up with intelligent information, actionable information? What does our panel feel?
Well, and understand part of the ASIAS program will be the development of different analysis tools that will help the industry also. When I look at analysis with a single carrier, it's very dependent on the quality of their analysts that they've hired and what tools are available to them, and where that may be very different in a carrier in either a different country or even a different airline, where if we collectively bring that together, as these tools are developed, they will become available not only as a whole, but for the individual carriers to use. And that's part of the problem we have, isn't it? Where you have all this data, and what are you doing with it? And how do we properly analyze it? And I think what we're discovering through the ASIAS program right now, it's going to be a growing project. There's already been a couple tools added to the program for proper analysis, and a couple discoveries that I find very exciting as a not only as part of ASIAS, but as an individual pilot, thinking, this is great. This is the type of things we want to come out. And so your question's right on target. We need to continually improve the processes and continually improve the tools we have, and then get that data out there.
And let me add, Don, Crystal, one of the challenges we're facing at the ASIAS Executive Board is even when we develop the tools and we come up with intelligent information from the data, the decision of what to do, what kind of action to take, is a real challenge. When you were looking at forensic information, the decision of what to do as we developed our safety enhancement plans was, in a relative sense, easy. We knew what to do. We knew if we implemented this, the information we had showed it would intervene in the causal events, and that accident wouldn't happen again. But what do you do when you're looking at this information in the future? The accident didn't happen. And we are struggling at the executive board is to, even when we develop these tools, how are we going to make a collective decision and what to do? So your question is right on. I think that's going to be the real challenge this community faces. Yes, sir. Do you have a mic?
Okay. Emilio from Embraer. We have a good program with some of our customers, and I think we can contribute on this data analysis. We had a very good, let's say, program in place with some of them. Of course, at the beginning, we had a lot of troubles in convincing the airlines to share the information, the data with us. But the benefit was so huge that more and more airlines is entering into this program. And the way we do is collecting all the raw data from the airplane and making analysis not only to prevent accidents, but to drive the training sessions, training programs, and giving also benefits to dispatch reliability. So we analyze the data, and for each scope, we have created the information from the data, and from the information, some metrics in order to drive, to improve the dispatch reliability, to improve the training program, and so on. And in some cases, helping us, I'm from the engineering area, right? So helping us to redesign or improve systems. So I think we can contribute on this program.
Great, thank you. Nice comment. Very welcome. Back there, I think, is that Bill McCabe?
John, could you talk to the other leg of the voluntary disclosures, the VDRP, you know, the information that comes out of the airlines, how that will go into ASIAS?
Dawn, I'm going to turn to you and.
Okay. You know, Bill, right now, that is in the planning stages, if you will, but that does eventually need to come into ASIAS. As we grow, I think what we had happen here is with all the FOCA data and ASAP data from the carriers that have joined ASIAS came in, all of a sudden it was like a tidal wave of data coming in. And to manage that, and to John's point, after the analysis comes out, how do we make positive corrective change without creating other issues? And how do you make those decisions? And so that's part of the process we're in. Should the VDRP data come in? Absolutely. Because again, these are issues the carriers have had, and they've actually said, look, here's the issue, here's how we're going to correct it. And even by collecting their corrective actions and seeing how effective they were, we can come up with maybe some other issues out of that, where, yeah, these corrective actions worked, these did not, and this is why. So, yeah, I would like to see that data eventually in the database.
I asked that. It seems like of the three programs, the VDRP is the one that is least collected in a way that can be analyzed. And Jay, you may want to talk to that, but there's an awful lot of data going in there that seems to go into a moment at this point in a big black hole. And I think part of that has to do with how the FAA is structured to capture that breadth of data across the carriers.
John, let me tag on to Don's comments. One of the tasks that Nick and Peggy have given me is to work with our flight standards organization and build to have, and I've done the first, in terms of preparing and conditioning this information, de-identifying it, but we have looked at all of the data that is currently in a digital database, 4 to 5 to 7 years, I think. We have begun to use the same tools, text mining, concept banks. We've taken a look at, ranked and rated all of the submittals in the VDRP program. I and my staff have looked at all of the VDRP roll-up submittals. My task for Peggy is to roll this up and paint a national picture for AVS, and then to begin to prepare and condition the information for future incorporation into SIAS. To your point, it is, and I think Don mentioned, it's a very rich database. And I think it was very valuable, Don. My initial reaction was because it not only stated the potential area where it was perceived there had been an infraction, it took the next step and said, these are the reasons we believe this infraction has occurred. And most importantly, it provided a rich data source, Bill, of what steps were taken to prevent or correct the problem at the submitter's level. So what we can start looking for is collecting those lessons learned. What are the positive steps that can prevent the kinds of the basis for the VDRP submittals? I think long term, I'm committed this year to provide a national roll-up for AVS, and that'll be a step along the way of making it ultimately available. But it has to be with the proper governance, Don, as you touched on at the beginning of this, so that it is de-identified, aggregated, and can be used effectively. It's a valuable data source.
So Jay, we're going to sign you up for another 10-year commitment to work for the FAA on that. I think we have.
Actually having fun.
I think we have time, perhaps, for one more question. Right here, okay.
I'd like to just echo the comments that this is a very interesting panel and offering some very good and useful information. My question really was Crystal's question, but a little bit of a follow-on to that with a little bit asking for a little bit more information. My name is Mary McMillan. I've worked at United Airlines for 20 years and am now working to help support the Aviation Safety Action Program for the ATO, and I've been working with these programs since 2002 in one capacity or another. And one of the things that I have found in my experiences is that it makes the program a robust and a viable and a vibrant program that accomplishes the goals that we want through information and data collection is actually acting on that information. And then again, that was what was Crystal was asking, and also the gentleman from Embry are talking about a portfolio of analysis tools that actually allows the organization to act upon the information that it collects. And I think it's very important that we actually collect information in a common taxonomy so that we can talk amongst group and amongst nations. However, where it comes, again, back down to where the rubber meets the road is how we actually act on the information. Just like any safety organization, a safety organization can collect information, but it's up to the organization then the responsible organization to make the changes that are necessary or that the data points to. The NTSB is a safety organization that has its most wanted list out and many recommendations that still have not been acted upon. So my question really is what sort of organizational changes do we need to make as a regulator, either in the United States or in other parts of the world, that will allow us to respond to and use the information in the way that it was intended, which is to make the organization a safer and a stronger operation. And I like to point out that I think one of the representative poster child for the ASAP programs and illustrative of this issue is the fatigue issue. We've been collecting fatigue information now through the ASAP programs, but we are still constrained with flight time, duty time regulations that tell us that we might not actually be serving the cause of safety. And how do we as an organization actually change in order to meet that need? And is it something that we do need to look to the legislation and Congress in order to help us with that?
Thank you very much for that question, and it's obviously a very insightful question, but it also has very difficult answer. Let me turn to my panelists and see if someone may offer an insight into that.
I could start with a few thoughts, John, but I think that was about 17 questions. Going back to maybe the SIAS program as it's currently structured, the airlines have requested the ability to benchmark their performance against the aggregate. And one of the things we do, maybe it goes back to Crystal's question, is we conduct the analysis on the aggregate, combination of FOC or ASAP data, whatever the data source is, and then we provide the tools and the criteria for use by the particular carrier who is an SIAS member. So we give the tools that can be used on the identified data at the carrier's original source. And I think that is one of the founding principles of SIAS, that is the tools that are either contributed by NASA through vulnerability discovery contributions or developed by FAA or by the contractors that we have working with us, MITRE and Austin Digital. Those are intended to be in the public venue, available to any contributor or stakeholder, and that has been one of our principles. As far as mandating the action, Don, I go back to your observation. There have been data analysis actions in the past, and some demonstrated the capability, but they lacked the execution. I think in the case of CAST, at least commercially, we have now combined the whole string of events. InfoShare, as you know, had been previously held separate from SIAS. It is now directly coupled as an input. The SIAS recommendations, AEB, go through Peggy and Don Gunther to CAST. From a voluntary perspective, CAST has issued, since 1997, 70 solutions. And we've distributed that information on a CD, stamped out 15,000 copies, and distributed them worldwide. I don't know that we could have issued that many regulations for 70 solutions in 9 years, which I think is virtually impossible. I'm a strong proponent of voluntary data sources, voluntary participation in data analysis, and voluntary acceptance of the results in action. I think I'd return to Don at that point.
Yeah, the only other comment I'd like to make, Mary, is on the fatigue issue is certainly a concern. It's a concern for all of us. And I think one of the things that we as an industry can do, there's been a lot of wonderful work done overseas, a lot of work being done here now. I think within a safety management program, we need to have a fatigue risk management group. And that fatigue risk management group needs to help analyze that data within your safety management program. And if you have a good, solid safety management program, then the loop is completed, where not only are you doing the analysis, but you are making corrective actions and you are monitoring those actions to see if they're effective. And so using the science that's out there within a very solid fatigue risk management team, I think will help some of those issues.
Great comment. I want to thank all of you for active participation. as I wrap this up, I would like to make an observation that I am so excited about this new frontier of information sharing. I guess it's not new, but I think we've made tremendous progress in recent years, that it clearly shows to me that this is the future of reducing the accident rate all around the globe, is this better sharing of information. And I am extremely pleased to see the great progress, of course, we're making here in the United States. Dr. Hong shared with us what's going on over in Asia-Pacific area. I know our partners in Europe are doing a great job, and in Brazil, I know we've got a very close relationship going on there. It's not without its very serious challenges, as we talked earlier, about the individual country legal codes and legal obstacles. And of course, we mentioned the video recorder, and that is a major, major obstacle. But we're at the cusp, I think, of great progress, and I think this community is directly and actively involved in that, and I think that's a very thing for all of us to be proud of. And finally, I'd like all of you to please join me in thanking our panelists for joining us today.